Hello everyone, thank you for being here. My name is Esma and today I'll walk you through a simulation study on how engineer behavior influences the outcome of an API-based cyber attack and how an AI-driven coach can help steer things in a better direction. First, something about APIs. APIs are the silent workhorses of modern digital infrastructure. They quietly enable apps, devices, and systems to communicate with one another, speeding up automation, enabling real-time data exchange, and helping businesses scale faster than ever before. But with great connectivity comes great vulnerability. Recent reports paint a sobering picture. In 2024, F5 revealed that nearly 1/3 of customer-facing APIs still lack basic encryption, and IBM's latest breach report estimated the average global cost of a data breach at $4.9 million. And the threats aren't just financial. In 2020, British Airways was fined £20 million after an API vulnerability exposed data from 400,000 customers. And in 2022, an API was exploited in Ukraine to disrupt national power infrastructure. These examples show that API security failures can spill over from the digital world into real-world harm. Most organizations respond to this challenge by focusing on technical defenses, like encryption or authentication and firewalls. But that's only part of the picture. Because technology alone doesn't make the final call, but people do. Security often comes down to what individual engineers see, believe, and decide in the moment. So in that sense, API security isn't just a technical issue, but also a cognitive one. How do factors like workload, experience, optimism bias, or trust in leadership shape whether an engineer detects and reports a threat, or lets it slip by? This research zooms in on precisely that question, and it explores whether a new kind of support, a digital AI coach, can step in and help guide those critical human decisions. Alright, so to do that, I created a realistic threat scenario. It starts off seemingly normal. An engineer begins developing an API, but in the background, a hacker is already probing for weaknesses. The story unfolds based on how the engineer perceives risks, whether they notice anomalies, and most importantly, what they do when something feels off. So there are two possible outcomes here. Either the engineer reports the threat and the organization takes corrective action, or they ignore it and data gets stolen and there will be damage to the company and its clients. And there are two versions of this scenario, one with only the engineer and one with the AI coach. But before we look into how that is modeled, I will first briefly explain the modeling approach. So I used a network-oriented modeling approach based on temporal causal networks, developed by Jan Treur. In this framework, the elements of a network, referred to as states, are connected through weighted causal links. Each state has an activation level that evolves over time, depending on the input it receives from connected states. To determine how multiple inputs affect a single state, combination functions are used. So these functions aggregate incoming influences, and the result is then moderated by a speed factor that determines how quickly the state updates. To model learning and adaptation, I included self-modeling components known as W states and triple W states. These represent weights that can change dynamically during the simulation. And this is both on first order and second order level. So the W states can adapt connection weights between base level states. So the W states are on the first order, which is the blue plane. And the triple W states, they adapt connections between W states on the first order level. So the triple W states are located on the second order level, which is the purple plane. And the base plane is in pink. But this is not my own network model. This is an example from the book by Jan Treur. All right, let's now look at the first model, which is the default model, meaning only the engineer is present here and no AI coach yet. So this model follows a detailed sequence of events starting with the development phase. So the scenario begins with start API development, which is located right here. And this influences both the engineer's skills and API development protocol strength. In turn, these two drive API protocol adherence, that is right here. And this is either directly via engineer skills or indirectly via beliefs, like belief protocol is useful and the decision to adhere to protocol. So that is this way. If adherence is strong, it leads to a more well-monitored API and up-to-date defenses, increasing the overall API security. So that's these three states right here. Meanwhile, the attacker starts at start hacking, which is this state right here, progressing through reconnaissance, detect vulnerability, and if successful, this results in data extraction and damage to the company and its customers. But the engineer may notice this via unusual activity, which is right here. And this is the turning point. From here, two paths are possible. So the left path leads to inaction. In this case, the engineer believes that the activity is of no risk and decides to ignore it. On the right side, the engineer believes that the activity is risky, decides to investigate it further, and eventually reports the activity. And then there are some post-reporting outcomes, which include fixing vulnerability, damage control, protocol revision, and training. And then, as you can see, there are multiple W states adapting multiple base level connection weights. So most of the W states are adapting connection weights in the mental model of the engineer, which is right here in the green oval. And these W states that influence base connections in the engineer's mental model, they are influenced by certain context factors. So these are experience, workload, trust in team and management, optimism bias, and responsibility. Okay, next up is the model with the AI coach. So this one is a little bit more complicated, but the default model, which we just saw, is still present right here. And then here we find the mental model of the AI coach, which is assumed to be perfect. So it receives the same input signals, such as API protocol strength and unusual activity connecting to its internal states. AI belief protocol is useful, which is right here. And AI noticing something unusual, which is right here. So what makes the AI coach powerful is its use of the monitor states and the second order adaptation states. So we have the monitor states here in red, and we have the triple W states here in the purple plane. So how does this work? So if the engineer fails to act, for example, if decision to report doesn't activate, so decision to report is right here. So if this one doesn't activate, monitor state x63 activates. So that is this one right here. And this triggers the triple W state, which then strengthens the connection between the AI coach W state and the corresponding engineer W state. So this is the W state for the AI coach, and this is the W state for the engineer, and this link will then get stronger, which in turn strengthens this connection. So this makes the engineer more likely to take the right action next time. And the other monitor states include X59, which monitors decision to adhere to protocol, X60, which monitors decision to do nothing, X61 monitors belief activity is of risk, and lastly X62, which monitors decision to investigate further. And these are also connected to triple W states so that the AI coach can step in and strengthen the right base level connections in the mental model of the engineer. So yeah, with that, I hope how the AI coach functions is clear now. And very important to remember is that the AI coach does not directly influence engineers' beliefs and decisions, but it can only do so indirectly via its monitor and triple W states. All right, now on to the simulations. So I ran simulations under three conditions: an optimal condition, a standard condition, and a suboptimal condition. So the standard condition represents a realistic baseline scenario with balanced values for all context factors. The suboptimal condition simulates a strained organizational environment with high workload and cognitive bias and lower responsibility and experience. And the optimal scenario reflects an ideal setting for adaptive performance with high responsibility and experience, low optimism bias, and high trust levels. On the slide, there are two sets of graphs. On the left, we have the results for the default model, which includes the base level states. These represent things like the hacker's progress, so reconnaissance, exploit vulnerability, data extraction, the engineer's reactions, noticing something unusual, decision to investigate, decision to report, and the system's defensive responses, or the post-reporting responses, fixing vulnerability and damage control. And on the right, we have the AI enhanced model. But here I've only plotted the triple W states, which represent the AI coach interventions and the corresponding engineer states that are being monitored. For example, decision to report, believe activity is of risk, and decision to investigate. Okay, now let's start with the engineer-only model shown in the left-hand plots. Under optimal conditions, we see early detection and fast reporting. The state report activates quickly, which triggers damage control, fixes the vulnerability, and strengthens API security. And as a result, the hacker's progress is cut off early. In the standard run, the same overall pattern unfolds, but more slowly. Reporting happens a bit later, and while damage is still contained, the damage does persist for longer. The suboptimal run shows the most delay. The engineer hesitates, and the decision to do nothing state remains active for too long. This delays the response, so we see greater data extraction and more prolonged company damage before any corrective actions kick in. And now if you look at the AI coach enhanced model, that's the right-hand side, we can see the difference the AI coach makes. So in the standard and suboptimal runs especially, the AI coach intervenes early, reinforcing beliefs like, oh, this might be risky and I should investigate. You will notice the AI coach triple W state activate during these moments of hesitation, nudging the engineer toward faster reaction. So reports are made earlier, vulnerabilities are patched quicker, and overall risk is significantly reduced, even under the most challenging conditions. But of course, this is only observational, based on graphs, and it is also kind of hard to see on the slides, you know, the difference between all the lines. But next I will go over the what-if analysis and the risk assessment, and there the impact the AI coach has will become clear. So in the what-if analysis, I focused on reporting behavior and looked at how it's affected by the engineer's belief that something is risky, their willingness to investigate, and their trust in the team. To be more precise, the what factors were the activation levels of the report state at 3 specific time points, 40, 45, and 50. The if factors were the common speed factor for the W states, for the engineer's belief activity is of risk, and decision to investigate further, and the initial value of trust in team and management. So these if factors can either get a low or a high value, which results in 4 different combinations. So both if factors low value, both a high value, or F1 low value, F2 high value, or F2 low value and F1 high value. Also important to mention is that the outcomes of the what factors were classified as high or low severity, depending on whether the likelihood of reporting was below or above a critical threshold. And in this case, the threshold is 0.83. Alright, so here we have the result of the what-if analysis for the default model. So what we see is that at time point 40, almost all combinations of the if factors lead to high severity outcomes, which is undesirable. At t is 45, there are 2 undesirable outcomes, and at t is 50, there is 1 undesirable outcome. But if we then take a look at the what-if analysis results for the AI coach model, we see some clear improvements. So at t is 40, it's the same. So we still have 3 undesirable outcomes and 1 desirable outcome. But at t is 45, then we only have 1 bad outcome left. And at t is 50, there are only good outcomes left, which really decreases the risk assessment here, which actually drops to 0 compared to the 1.44 for the default model. So in conclusion, this analysis shows that the AI coach supports the engineer by accelerating the right decisions at the right time and thereby actively reducing the risk. So to sum up, this study explored how human decision making and an AI coach influence API security during simulated attacks. And it was found that cognitive and behavioral factors significantly affect breach outcomes, and that the AI coach improved breach outcomes by reducing unproductive inaction and increasing reporting likelihood, even under suboptimal conditions. While this sounds promising, this study has its limitations. For starters, the AI coach is a conceptual construct in a simulated environment, and its real-world implementation and perfect guidance are unaddressed, so it's not sure how feasible that is. And also, the simulations relied on estimated parameters rather than empirical data. That being said, I have some recommendations for organizations. For example, foster a strong security culture through mental model alignment. The whole team should be aware of the dangers, but also know what the development protocol is. Basically, team members should have a shared understanding of the task for optimal collaboration. Second, implementing training programs addressing cognitive biases and decision-making under uncertainty. So not just focusing on the technical skills, but also the cognitive ones. And lastly, for future research, I recommend the following directions. So first, empirically validate these models through field studies, because right now the parameters are based on estimations, and I think that could be better in the future, but field studies do take up a lot of time. But it's one direction. And also, future research could investigate practical implementation and ethical implications of AI coaches, like the one in this paper. And with that, we have reached the end of the presentation. I hope you have learned something today, and I want to thank you for your attention.